Imagine your life as a teenager. You have very few friends. You have not been able to go to school. There have been times where meals have been somewhat plenty, but that's only been because of the generosity of your neighbors. Most of the time, meals have been lean, and it's normal to leave the table a bit hungry. You hear the comments from your neighbors and strangers at the market, all treating you and your parents and all your families as pariahs, because you were born blind. The automatic assumption is that for any person with any kind of illness or deformity is that way because someone, and in this case the parents, had sinned. So what had they done? Where did they mess up? The family were treated with suspicion, because not only does it affect those around them, but what if it was contagious? Or maybe this family will be even punished in a worse way, because they might sin again. So to help make ends meet, you've had to resort to begging in the marketplace, relying on the generosity of others to sustain life. Forget how difficult it is to get around because you can't see a thing. So now talk about the world opening up to you because a stranger walked up to you, put mud on your eyes, and all of a sudden, after you wash, you can see. Now your brain wouldn't know how to process all of this visual stimulation. You have never seen a person, a house, a tree, or an apple. You probably have to close your eyes in order to get around because nothing would be familiar. The sounds and the feelings and the smells, yes, that would be familiar. But your brain cannot yet figure out all the sights, the colors and shapes yet. Then to top that all off, the local temple authorities start questioning you and your parents. Who is it that did this? And why on the Sabbath? What authority did this person have? And the questions continue again and again. And your answer remains the same. I do not know. I have never met him before. But what I do know is that he put mud on my eyes, and after I washed, I received my sight. I can see. Even his parents stated that they did not know this stranger, but said that their son, yes, indeed, had been born blind. And this was confirmed by their neighbors, because now he has received his sight. They are incredulous. Rather than the temple leaders rejoicing in this miracle, they cause a stir because simply it happened on the Sabbath. They're trying to deny that it actually happened, and they certainly don't want to think that God had anything to do with this. It would upset their understanding about God and the rules of Moses that they live by. In frustration, the parents tell the leaders to ask the young man himself. After all, he's an adult, and he can speak for himself. And the leaders, yet again, ask the young man, but this time he turns the tables on them and asks them if they want to become Jesus' followers. Cheeky brat. This young man had an encounter with Jesus, the Son of God, and his life was completely changed. We don't know that the young man asked for this, or even if Jesus asked this young man's permission. But when it did happen, Jesus offered hope. He offered this young man an opportunity to have his life completely changed around. He was offered transformation, and not just for him, but for his whole family. the stigma would have been lifted. No longer would they be objects of suspicion, although now they were front and center in their community, as they realized that God had indeed seen this family, and God chose to do a mighty act. And Jesus was able to clear up that suspicion. They had not, in fact, done anything wrong. This young man's blindness was not from sin. In fact, this young man's blindness was so that God's works could be revealed in him. Wow, what a powerful message for this young man and for his family. But it also opened up the whole community to God's redeeming love and God's care for God's people. There had been all kinds of rules and regulations and how to properly live on how not to offend God. But in a way, don't we do the same thing? We sometimes wonder just how much we can get away with. Do we really need to stop completely at that stop sign? And sometimes we negotiate with God. God, I promise, if you do X, Y, and Z, if you just meet my conditions, well, then I'll believe in you. This is what I want to see happen. So I will believe in you if you work it out my way. Or how about, if I go to church every week, I know that God will protect me and I won't come to harm. That one kind of sounds like Jesus' temptation in the desert. Or we might say, I prayed to God, so I know everything will work out just as I want. After all, God answers prayer. Well, yes, God answers prayer, but it's our God who sees the big picture. In God's infinite wisdom, we have to trust when God says, not yet, or just be patient, or even sometimes when we get no. Prayer is answered, but just not always in the way that we would like. It's all too easy to slip into thinking that we can make God in our own image, rather than God making us in God's image. We think that we have influence and control, but it doesn't take much to shake us out of that realization. Even just yesterday over at All Saints in Colorful Meditation, one of the participants said, "Can I ask a question?" Of course. Well, why is it that bad things can happen to good people? And how can good things happen to bad people? Let's start with the big questions, I said. So of course that led into a discussion about blame, because we do tend to look for a cause, a reason, so that perhaps next time we won't have the same result. But that's where trust comes in, and the stories of faith come in, and that is where our faith comes in. As people of faith, we believe that the journey we are on is not solitary, that we have a God who accompanies us and is present with us wherever and whenever we are, and whatever it is that we are experiencing. God is there when things are going well, but God is also still there when things are upside down and backwards, and when we least expect it, and when life throws us curves. Our God is still present with us. In our Old Testament lesson today, Samuel thinks he's got everything all figured out. He selects the young man that he thinks is the most obvious one to become the next king. But God had other plans, and it was the younger brother, David, that God chose. David doesn't fit Samuel's ideas of kingship. All of Jesse's sons were paraded before him, each one to be considered for the role of king. But it was the youngest, David, who was God's choice. Surprise! Then David was anointed, and from that day we are told that the Spirit of God was with him. When a crisis has passed, we tend to look back, and we realize how God's presence has indeed been with us. Hindsight is 20/20. But were we so sure when we were in the middle of that turmoil? Weren't we filled with questions and dilemmas? But in the midst of the chaos of our lives, we can rely on God's presence to be with us and to guide us. God continues to be active in our world and active in and through us. So in these last days of Lent, may we take time over these days that we may continue to hear the voice of God and be ready to ever follow, sure and confident in God's presence with us. Amen.